Yes, sir. At once.
Waiting order. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Reporting. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Reporting. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Reporting. Affirmative. Very well. Yes, sir. Affirmative. At once. Of course. Very well. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. At once. At once.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Reporting. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Comrade.
Affirmative. At once.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Reporting at once. Affirmative. Very well.
Reinforcements have
Reporting.
arrived.
Affirmative. Affirmative.
Yes, sir.
Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Ready and waiting. Agreed.
Comrade. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Don't you fight now. Let's out. Doggy. Power on. Extra frenzy. Fully charged. It's done.
Waiting order. Affirmative.
Ready and waiting.
Unit lost.
Waiting orders. Yes, sir.
Reporting. Affirmative.
Ready and waiting. Affirmative. Reporting. At once. Very well.
Yes, done.
Reporting. Very well.
Don't you fight now. Power on.
Ready and waiting.
Don't you. Doggy. Fully charged. Bird, baby, bird.
Waiting Affirmative. Affirmative.
Need a jump? First, baby, first. Lights out.
Unit
Extra
lost.
crispy. First, baby, first. Lights out. Lights out. Shocky. Fully charged.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Comrade?
Yes, sir. Very well. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Reporting. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Agreed. Reporting. Very well. At once. Of course.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Waiting order. Acknowledged.
Unit
Affirmative.
lost.
Need a jump? Power on.
Unit lost.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Need a power on.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Reinforcements have
Yes,
arrived.
acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Lights out. Lights out. Power on.
Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Yeah. Shocking.
Comrade. Acknowledged.
Don't you shocking.
Reporting. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Reinforcements have
Acknowledged.
arrived.
Acknowledged.
First objective met. 10 minutes
Acknowledged.
remaining.
Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Need a jump?
Yes, sir. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged.
Need a jump? Extra crispy. Lights out. Burn, baby, burn. Fully charged.
Comrade. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Unit lost.
Yes, sir.
Reinforcements have
Acknowledged.
arrived.
Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Comrade. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Waiting order.
Unit lost.
Affirmative. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Yeah, let's dance. Extra crispy.
Comrade, acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Affirmative.
Waiting order.
Naval unit lost.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Naval unit lost. Warning, 5 minutes remaining.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Reporting. Comrade. Affirmative.
Warning, 4 minutes
Reporting.
remaining.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Waiting order. Acknowledged. Waiting order. Affirmative. Reporting. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Report. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Unit lost.
Affirmative.
Warning, 3
Affirmative.
minutes remaining.
Comrade.
Naval unit lost.
Let's dance.
Awaiting orders. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Reporting. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge.
Need a jump? Good.
Warning,
Very
2
good.
minutes remaining.
Lights out.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
The juice power on. Burn, baby, burn.
Warning, 1
Fully
minute remaining.
charged.
Comrade. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Reinforcements have arrived. Unit lost. Reinforcements have arrived.
Waiting order. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Waiting order. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Reinforcements have arrived.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Reporting. Affirmative. Reporting. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Acknowledge. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Reporting. Affirmative.
Unit lost.
Affirmative.
Engineering.
Reporting. Affirmative. Of course. Acknowledge. Affirmative.
Reporting. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Unit lost.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Reporting.
Yes, sir.
Reporting. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Engineering. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Reporting. Affirmative. Affirmative. Awaiting orders. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Reporting.
Reporting.
Unit
Acknowledge.
lost.
Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge.
Comrade. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Reporting. Of course. Agreed. Affirmative. At once. Yes, sir. Very well. Yes, sir. Affirmative. 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 Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir. At once. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Very well. Of course. Very well. Very well. Yes, sir. At once. Affirmative. Agreed. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Very well. Yes, sir. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledge. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledge. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. 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 Affirmative. 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 Acknowledge. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Comrade. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Waiting order. Waiting order. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Unit lost.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Vehicle reporting. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Waiting orders. Yes, sir. Very well. Yes, sir.
Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Comrade. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Waiting order. Acknowledged.
Mission accomplished.